Hi, I'm Councilmember Hillary Chester from the town of Edmonston. Please join us for our Black History Month celebration on Sunday, February 28th, beginning at 4 p.m. on Zoom. This year, our theme is A History of Optimistic Change.
Hello, everyone. I'm Councilman Johnson from the town of Edmonston, Maryland. Join us in our Black History Month via Zoom. As Congressman John Lewis said, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime or maybe many lifetimes. And each one of us in every generation must do our part.
Hi, I'm Councilwoman Betsy McCauley from the town of Edmonston. I'd like you to stay tuned to watch our celebration of Black History Month via Zoom. I'd like to also quote former Congressman John Lewis: "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America."
I'm Councilmember Sarah Turberville from the town of Edmonston. Join us as we celebrate Black History Month. Our country was created over 200 years ago, but it was not a true democracy until 1965 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act that ensured that all of our citizens, including Black Americans, could participate in this democracy. This month for me is a time to reflect on how it was the struggle of Black people throughout the history of this nation that has given true life to this democracy. As many wise people have said, Black history is actually the history of America, and it is something to be honored and celebrated this month and throughout the year.
Welcome to the Town of Edmonston's Black History Month program, celebrating a history of optimistic change. We are glad you are able to join us. As Michelle Obama said, if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's the power of using your voice. Today, we are using our voices to honor our past, celebrate the present, and to look optimistically ahead to our future. We've got an exciting program with the following guests. Reverend Gail Fisher Stewart of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Pastor Myron Leach, lead pastor of Shiloh Abundant Life Center, Dr. Jasmine Skollark, senior pastor of Victory Grace Center. Also, Bladensburg High School Junior ROTC Color Guard, and youth participants Faith and Kofi Aben, and Jelena and Jamari Lisenby from our community in Edmonston. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the program.
every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let all rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Say a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And this will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meanings. My country's 'tis, of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring.
And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black and white men, Jew and Gentile, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Free at last. Free at last.
Free at last, free at last. Free at last, free at last.
Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Hello, I'm Chief Elliott Gibson from the town of Edmonston, Maryland. In 1895, former Congressman Robert Small said, "My race needs no special defense, for the past history of them in this country proves them to be equal of any people anywhere. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." Thank you.
I was born by the river in a little tent door, just like this river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh yes, it will. It's been too hard a living, and I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh yes, it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown. They keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh yes, it will. Then I go to my brother. I said, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will.
The Reverend Gail Fisher Stewart spent 20 years working as a police officer for the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. She joined the department in 1972, 4 years after riots destroyed parts of the city following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. At the time, African Americans made up 70% of the people living in the nation's capital. At the same time, the police department was overwhelmingly white and the police community relations were strained. Later, she earned a master's and doctorate degree at the University of Maryland and became a consultant to law enforcement agencies and a university-level teacher of criminal justice, writing a multicultural training manual for police officers. She was ordained in 2015 after earning a theology degree at Wesley Seminary. While serving as Associate Rector of Calvary Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., Fisher Stewart founded the Center for Study of Faith and Justice. She has worked tirelessly to host forums about race, social justice, inequality, and policing. She has established a network of partnerships between the center and the diocese, local nonprofits, and national policing organizations. She currently is interim priest at St. Luke's Church in Washington, D.C.
So what can I say? How many Black History Months have I experienced? Beginning with Negro History Week. But what I think about mostly, and I am a child, a product of the 1960s. And as I reflect back on January 6th of this year, and I think about how we saw the National Guard troops finally amassing on the mall. And people were all upset about that. But those of us who grew up after or during when Martin Luther King was assassinated, the National Guard troops were in our neighborhoods. They were on our streets. They weren't far away at the mall. They were in our communities. And so when looking at January 6th, many of us said, we've been this way before, except that they're not in our communities. And it recalled the civil rights struggle. And of course, we saw people battling. But we grew up with the police, the state troopers in Alabama, beating Black folks who were just asking for the right to vote. And then here on January 6th, you have folks who are going to the Capitol building to stop the steal, to overturn the vote of a people who have struggled forever to have the vote. we like to talk about this country being a democracy, but it was not a democracy until everyone had the right to vote. And still there are people who are trying to disenfranchise people of color to keep us from voting. And so as I think about the civil rights struggle, I think we got a little bit too comfortable. We accepted crumbs from the master's table, and we got comfortable that we could shop where we wanted and send our kids to schools that we wanted, and we could sometimes live in communities we wanted. And so all of this, our comfort, led us into a false sense of security, a false sense of freedom. And it's all come back with a vengeance, all because we had the audacity to vote for a Black man as president of this country. I mean, think about it. The only way Black people are supposed to be in the White House is to clean it and to serve. But to have a Black man as president was to just totally destroy the myth of white supremacy. And because that myth was destroyed, that you're not the only people who are valued, you're not the only people who can contribute, you're not the only people who have a right to everything this country has, it ended up with Donald Trump and January 6th. Somehow, we have to gird up our loins and get back into the battle, get back into the struggle, especially the church, the Black church, because the Black church was the center of the civil rights, the center of the struggle. And even our churches got comfortable with crumbs from the master's table. They could build their temples unto themselves. They could move to the suburbs. But we forgot what the Black church represented to the Black community, that this is a place that not only do you come to get your spiritual nourishment, you come to get ready for battle. It is a holy battle that ensures that every person, regardless of color, that every person is able to avail themselves of what this country has to offer, because this is what God has placed here. And so to say that some people can have and others can't because of their skin color or their gender or their nationality, that should not make sense. And so the church, the Black church, regardless of what denomination we may find ourselves in, we have got to go back to be the center of that struggle, to be prophets in the public square, to call out injustice. That is our call. We have to be like Jesus in the temple. We need to overturn some tables and make people listen, or else we lose our legitimacy, because if we keep trying to preach, trying to get people to heaven, and people are catching hell on this earth, then the church loses its legitimacy. It loses its right to have people pledge their allegiance, if you will, to the church. The church becomes irrelevant. And as we look at the number of young people who are saying, forget the church. What is the church doing? I don't need the church. Now they know Jesus, they know God, that's not a problem, but they don't need the church, because what difference does the church make in their lives? And so for this February, this Black History Month, we have to recognize that what happened on January 6th was not an anomaly. It's been bubbling up under the surface all along. It just blew up on January 6th. And the other thing that we have to recognize is that people of color would never have been able to do that. There would have been body bags stacked so high we would not have been able to count them. The police would have shot folks and used their normal claim. I feared for my life. We feared for my life. But they didn't fear until folks started coming through the doors of the Capitol. They didn't fear. And the reason they didn't fear, and we know that law enforcement had intelligence about this uprising, this planned uprising. The reason there was not action, the reason why it seemed that law enforcement was not prepared is because armed white people are not viewed as a threat. Armed white people are viewed as exercising their Second Amendment rights. Why else would you see white people, armed white people, on state capitol steps with their arms around the police and the militia taking selfies? Because armed white people are not viewed as a threat. But we, people of color, our skin is a threat. We are always armed because Black is to be armed and dangerous. And we have to say that out loud. We have to let people know we understand what is going on. Because as long as we are silent or we talk about it among ourselves, it gives power to evil. Because we saw evil on January 6th. That was evil. Evil because people who are not white dared to exercise their right to vote. I mean, you hear people say, we're going to take our country back. Take your country back from whom? Number one, you stole it in the first place. You stole it. You're on stolen land. And so if we're going to be serious about this, if we are going to make Black History Month other than something where you get a day off here and there, you have some sales, you have some speeches, we're going to have to reclaim that prophetic voice in the public square. And as my grandmother would say, we need to tell the truth and shame the devil. That we understand what's going on. We understand that some whites are upset because for them, equality feels like oppression. Well, get used to it because we will be silent no longer. We are going to insist that whatever this country has by virtue of being a citizen is ours, and we're not going to be silent. We are going to fight for what is ours. We're going to take up that cross. We're going to take up that cross. And just because you see our preachers in these collars, don't let those collars fool you. Do not let these collars fool you. Because this just makes us even stronger. Because we know that we are yoked to the one who gave his all so all may be free. So yeah, this is a different Black History Month, one that is calling us to go back to our roots, go back to those civil rights roots and call out the injustice that is being heaped upon us. Call out the injustice, call out the lies, call out the duplicity of those who have been elected to represent the people. Because whenever they speak of the American people, a lot of those representatives are not talking about people who look like me. And we know it. We know it. And so we're going to call out your lies. We're going to call out your duplicity. We're going to call out because We don't want those coming up behind those who have already come up, who are tapping us on the shoulder and saying, we thought you handled this. We don't want the babies to come up and tap those who are behind us on the shoulder and say, we thought you handled this. We're going to handle it this time. We're going to make sure that this country lives up to its promises to all who call themselves citizens.
Pastor Myron is the fifth and youngest child of the late Reverend William and Mother Annie L. Leach. He made his profession of faith and was baptized as a young child under the leadership of his father at the Oak Grove Missionary Baptist Church in Charles County, Maryland. He also assisted his mother at an early age by playing the piano and serving in the music ministry at Oak Grove, as well as various ministries in the Washington metropolitan area. Pastor Myron earned a Bachelor of Arts from Washington Bible College and received a Master of Arts from Liberty University. Pastor Myron joined Shiloh Abundant Life Center in 1990, where he served as chief musician and accepted the call to preach the gospel in 1991, and has been privileged to lead and serve Shiloh Abundant Life Forestville since 2016. Pastor Myron is also an entrepreneur at heart and is a licensed realtor in the state of Maryland, as well as the District of Columbia. He is the author of Strategic Moves, 30 Days of Strategic Moves, and is currently working on several other projects. He is married to Cynthia Venable Leach, and they are blessed with two daughters, Mariah and Michaela, who also faithfully serve in the ministry at Shiloh Abundant Life Center, Forestville.
Hello and good day to all who have joined us today for this Black History program. We certainly are thankful for the opportunity to share a few insights as relates to Black history struggle and how it looks today in terms of civil rights and current challenges as well. Before I start with my few comments, I wanted to express my special thanks to Mayor Tracy Gant, Rodney Barnes, who is the town administrator, as well as Avery Gray, who's been a great person to coordinate all of this, as well as all the council members. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of my insights. As I reflect on this month of Black History, I believe despite all of the challenges that we are still facing right now, that we still have a reason to be optimistic about what is ahead. And I do think about and reflect on the struggle, of course, over the past several years and decades, to be honest, as it relates to the United States of America. But we, as a people, we are still pressing towards, I believe, a level playing field. And that's what it's about, making sure that we are pressing our local, our state, our churches for a level playing ground where civil rights will still be one of the things that is most important in our community. I believe that we must continue to make progress individually as well as collectively. We are a community. And as I also reflect on the challenges of now, the pandemic, as all of it has brought about so many different struggles and unveiled so many other challenges. But despite all of those challenges, we still have a reason to be optimistic. We still have a reason to be hopeful about what is ahead. I do believe that there are still challenges ahead as far as racial intolerance, institutional racism, and of course, most recently, health disparities. I believe that the African American community, as well as the African American church, must continue to be actively engaged in our communities and be relentless as it relates to our approach to keep the movement alive. And what movement am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the movement in terms of the struggle, the movement to relentlessly see change in our communities. We must continue to make our voices be heard on the local, the state, and the national level. We must continue to utilize our voice. And believe it or not, we do have a voice. For As we have gotten into this year, of course, our voice has been our vote. And I want to encourage each of you to continue to exercise your vote and not um, be a bystander or a person who has or exhibits bystander apathy. You see something, but you don't do anything about it. We all have been challenged, I'm sure, with that aspect in our lives, but we can no longer be bystanders and be apathetic about our voice and our vote. We must continue to stress and press those who are around us and our families. It starts individually first, but it also starts with our families, our communities, our churches. We must continue to press ourselves and those who are around us to be engaged. Engaged how? Be engaged if you are a part of a local congregation. Be engaged in your congregation in terms of civil activities, civil rights, making sure that uh, persons in your church or your congregation are aware of what's happening. Be engaged with your senior citizens, making sure that they are taken care of and that they are not being ignored because seniors sometimes can fly or go under the radar, sometimes go unchecked, and we must be mindful about even our seniors. We must continue to fight the struggle, fight the power that it continues to exist. And I believe little by little, we're going to see progress. Over these last several years, we've seen so many different things that have tried to oppress our vote, to oppress our voice. But I'm going to say it again. We must continue to fight the power with our voice, be actively engaged on every level that we have access to. I recently shared on my social media page about a process of waiting and how sometimes when we don't see anything happening, we don't think anything is happening. But I believe that even though we may not see something happening, doesn't mean that it's not. And what do I mean by that is, well, what I mean by that is that there is improvement. There are improvements that are being made in our country. There are things that are actively happening, but we must continue to see and be progressively involved in those challenges to make sure that those things are still being done as it relates to us as a people. I believe there are things that are still working. There are things and better things that are ahead for us as we embrace the civil rights struggle. And civil rights, it's of course it has historically been something that African Americans have faced, but I believe that it's for all people. We must continue to fight for civil rights for all people, not just African Americans, but all people. Of course, we have somewhat of a disadvantage, so we must continue to press and push but civil rights, I believe, is for all people. You know, we must continue to, I believe, acknowledge our differences, but don't let the differences be the thing that stops us from working together in our communities. Celebrate the similarities, but we should always, and I would say also, find ways to work together to make progress in our communities and our families. I believe we're now at a point where we must continue to foster reconciliation. You know, there's so much hurt, there's so much division that has taken place over these last 4 years or 5 years. But I believe we're now in a place where reconciliation is the key to us continuing to get better, to be healed. Civil rights, again, it's a process that will continue. It has to continue until racism is eradicated and African Americans, brown, Hispanic, and all people are treated equally. I believe that our generation has an obligation to keep the conversation going. Keep the conversation going. I mean, in your families, keep the conversation going with your children. Keep the conversation going in your congregations, in your communities, wherever you are, wherever you find yourself. Keep the conversation going in terms of the civil rights struggle, because again, we may not see the progress right now, but there's still something that is happening. There's progress that's being made. We must continue to push, even when we don't see it. I want to encourage you again, keep the conversation going. Our struggle continues, but I believe that as our struggle continues, that they also point to victories that will be attained in the years to come. And as we experience those victories, we'll be able to see the progress that we did not see earlier, but we will be able to be recipients, and those who follow us will be the recipients, I'll say, of what we did. That means we have an obligation to continue. Again, I thank you so much for this opportunity just to share some of my insights as it relates to the African American struggle. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to say again, continue to push, continue to make progress individually, collectively in your communities, in your churches. You may not see the progress now, but later on, you're going to see it. We're all going to see it. We're going to see the improvement. And matter of fact, things are improving. It's about our perspective, but we must continue to be actively engaged in the process. That's my message. Be actively engaged in the process. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share.
Dr. Jasmine Skullark, a native of the island of Trinidad. Dr. Jasmine Jazz Skullark is a globally recognized pastor, teacher, evangelist, author, philanthropist, and ministry development consultant. She is also known as the Daughter of Thunder for the thunderous sound she makes in the earth that impacts the hearts and minds of all who come in contact with her ministry. She is the founder and pastor of Victory Grace Center, located in Maryland, and the president of Dr. Jazz Ministries. Her ministry reaches to Africa, Canada, the Caribbean, Europe, and throughout the United States. Dr. Jazz is humbled by the call that God has placed on her life and is passionate about her purpose, which is to encourage, educate, equip, and empower the world through the spoken and written word. She is indeed a woman who has been called for such a time as this.
Well, hey, thanks so very much. It's a Victory Day. This is Dr. Jazz, the senior pastor of Victory Grace Center, and I'm honored and delighted to share about my own historical experience in regards to Black History Month and where we are. And I must say, when I got the invitation, I was surprised to be invited because as many of you know, based on my accent, that I am not from the U.S., although I am a U.S. citizen wow, just about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I became a U.S. citizen right before I think Trump became president. I just wanted to be safe and secure in this land because I think this is an amazing country. And so when I look back over history, particularly Black history and Black American history, and in this Black History Month, my experience, I'll start from my experience and then I'll talk about some things that I've seen in the trend and where I sit as a pastor, as an influencer, as a leader. As I stated before, I am from Trinidad and I came to this country in 1995. And before I came to this country, I wasn't aware of the level of racism that I now see in the US. I think because racism was not prevalent in our country as much. I'm not saying it's not there, but what I would say in the island of Trinidad and Tobago, racism is not between black and whites as much as it's Indians and blacks. So Indians and blacks, that's our population and the challenges. The other thing too on my country that was very known for is sexism. So I spend a lot of time focusing on understanding this whole thing about sexism. Then I came to the US and went to college, school upstate New York, Binghamton, New York, called Practical Bible College. And it was in that place that I was introduced to what is known now as systemic racism. And I think, of course, learning about Dr. King and Malcolm X, and because I'm in the church world, the professional, the Christian world or the church world, understanding how church influence or how church ignored this whole thing of racism that is so prevalent. And so my understanding of it and my view of it, or my perspective of it, might be different from people who were born in this country, because it took some time actually for me to understand the depth of it. Now, after witnessing it for myself and seeing it so blatantly in our face in the recent movement of the recent incident with the George Floyd, and of course the killing of Dr. King and Breonna Taylor and so many things. I think it just now stands right in our face and we have to confront it. While it's Black History Month, I believe in what I call look into the future. But even before we look into the future, we definitely have to look at what has affected culture and what has affected the church. And I realize that there's a couple of things. In fact, I jot them down. Of course, this whole thing of this historical change that we are seeing in the Black community. There's a couple of things from 1980 to now 2021. There's a historical change in the Black community. There's a shifting in the Black community. I don't know if it is planned or if it's accidental or if it's progressive, but there is a shift in it. So let me talk about some of them. First of all, we all know that the civil rights movement and most movement that was progressive for African American in the U.S. started in the church. It started in the church. But now the activists that we're seeing, this movement of young Black people who are now in the front line, did not start in the church. These new movement, Black Lives Matters, and you can go on and on, started now outside of the church. These young activists did not grow up in the church. So I don't know if they did not grow up in the church, but they have a disconnection from the church. That's the first thing I see. So they have a low tolerance. They are passionate, they are driven, but my goodness, they don't hold on to that meek and mild Jesus. They want this radical religion, radical Jesus. They push the envelope, to push back the status quo. And honestly, they are challenging theology. They're challenging theology. So that's one of the big things that I've seen in the recent month, that these young activists who I'm all behind, I'm supporting, but they have no regards or no interaction or no connection to a church. Now, they may go to church, but there's no loyalty to the church. The second thing I want to say that is a very powerful movement that is taking place is social media and its new movement. This social media, oh my goodness, from Twitter, Facebook, IG, YouTube, Snapchat, and now the latest thing is Clubhouse. This social media has now done what, oh my goodness, Dr. King and Malcolm X and the John Lewis's could have never done, and that is they have rallied people from not just America, but now global. So this issue of racism now is not just housed in America, but now it is a global movement. And it is moving faster than lightning because of social media. And these young activists who are so innovative in their thinking and in their process is using social media to their advantage to cause and to infuse and to create, my goodness, this whole, first, number one, synergy with people from all walks of life. But number two, they're now employing millions of dollars. They are now employing millions of people who are now buying into it. I don't know if anybody have noticed in the last recent months and stuff, a lot of corporations now are using the word Black Lives Matters. A lot of commercials. Have y'all seen these commercials that has Black Lives Matter? The just recent Super Bowl, Tom Brady, who won, hey, listen, he had on the back of his helmet, "Stop Racism." When you look at all of these commercials and all of these superstars and these people who are in the sports world, and even Oprah in recent months have jumped in and is really now talking about this whole systemic racism. So how did this come about? Is because young people are using what we may not call mainstream media. They're not focusing on using television or using the radio, but in social media. And really, it reminds me of like when hip hop first started. You remember when hip hop first started? It was like this underground movement, and then it started coming up, coming, and now it just hit culture. And I have to say a caution right here, because I hope that as Black Lives Matter movement and any movement that is a civil rights movement, as they come into mainstream, the big thing is that, you know, that they will still be authentic to their mission. So this social media movement and young people using it as a vehicle to get their voices out there, to get the message out there, and to galvanize people around the message is powerful. Number three, I think this is the third thing that we have to pay attention to, and that is the role of Black young entrepreneurs. I mean, these young people, they're business owners. In fact, I heard something recently that there's this whole returning of something called bringing Black Wall Street back. I don't know if anybody heard it, bringing Black Wall Street back. And these are young people who are doing business. They believe in not working for somebody, but now being their own boss. And bringing Black Wall Street back. I think I watched that a couple of, maybe last year or so, because I wasn't even familiar with it until I went to an event with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, and to understand the power of Black Wall Street. And now it's coming back even in Washington, D.C. And there's this whole movement, and it's these young people who believe in generational wealth and creating wealth within their own community. And I'm excited about this. And these young people who graduated from Howard or graduated from several of the Black colleges, and then there's some of them who are not even graduates, but now they are in front, and what they're learning is that a stimulus check is not enough. I guess that's how you can say it. And they're learning that they are the captain of their own ship. And what I love about this is they're getting this revelation and this understanding at an early time. So the role of Black young entrepreneurs who are now putting money towards movement, putting money towards mission. In fact, I'll tell you a personal story. I pastor Church Victory Grace Center, and we were in a school. We were in Bladensburg High School, and then we in another school, and then COVID came, and we now, we are all on the internet. We are a digital church. And when I was talking to my young adults about us not having a place, what are we going to do? They say, Pastor, we rather you take the money and put it into a movement than put it into a mortgage. Did y'all catch that? They want you to put it into a movement rather than a mortgage. And to see these young entrepreneurs who understand the importance of a movement, and they rather put their time and their energy in a movement than in a mortgage, than in a building. That's why so many of them don't own homes, because they want to invest into what? A movement. Number 4, this trend, and again, this is just my personal observation, this trend has really and will continue to affect us in decades to come. And this thing has just come to the surface more and more powerfully. And that is this phrase that many people have now hold on to and now repeating it, particularly African American community. And that is Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. Yeah, and I don't know if it was because of COVID-19, but I think COVID-19 might have escalated it. But before COVID-19, more Black women in particular, not too sure about men because my lane is with the women, more Black women in particular are wearing their hair natural. Black women and natural hair. I don't know anybody who's seen it. Black women now are coming to the forefront with natural hair. Superstars. I mean, you won't be surprised of a singer or a sports person who stands in front of the mic and their hair is natural, and the whole statement is Black is beautiful. I think Beyonce came out with the show, Black is king and Black is beautiful. And so now it's this embracing of our culture, embracing of who we are, this self-love. And for many, many years, we did not have that. So this Black is beautiful again has resurfaced, and now we're seeing it, and now women are talking about this, I'm Black and I'm proud, and Black is beautiful, and affirming Black, and teaching our young boys and our young girls to value and appreciate themselves. I think this is going to move us even further closer to where we need to be in terms of a race and a people. But those are my observations from a historical perspective. Again, that's my 2 cents or my take of what I've seen that is prevalent in the Black community, that is going to affect us, and that's already affecting us in weeks and months and years to come. I hope this has been helpful to anybody. Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you for your thoughtful and inspiring talks. We are now moving on to a brief discussion on where do we go from here. What do future movements look like to you? And what grassroots efforts to national policies are needed to keep us moving forward? So I do thank you all for volunteering, for agreeing to be part of the panel and agreeing to provide some insight on your history and optimistic change this year on our Black History program. And it was different because we just asked you to talk and provide information, and without an audience, without a congregation, and really without, honestly, you know your congregation, but you really didn't know us in a way, and just providing that insight. So I just thank you so much for doing that. And today we're just going to kind of have another talk amongst us. You know, now you're all together, and I just appreciate the different insight that you can bring. There was a reason that I selected the three of you, and it's because of the different insight that you can provide. Of course, I know Pastor Myron, and I've had the opportunity to share a panel with Reverend Gail Fisher before. So I know her background in DC, and it's rich. And I am working with Victory Grace and Dr. Jazz locally. So I know a bit about each of you and what you can bring. And so I said, optimistic change and generation, because we're dealing with so much. I'm talking about how did you transition from your congregation going to coming into the service, and now we have to Zoom. You know, now we have to do a conference call. So that was a transition. We had to do some things different. Mm-hmm. So that's the great thing that we can bring now to this conversation. You know, there's some changes that have to be made. There's some changes that have been made, and there's some things that are stagnant. And so that's what I want to hear from us, the panel. So we can go ahead and start, whoever wants to jump in. I want to remind you of the question. It is, what do future movements look like to you? And what grassroots efforts have to be made nationally in order for us to move forward, you know, policy-wise, us mentally, what do we have to do church-wise? Mm-hmm. Anyone, just jump in. It's free flowing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am so glad to be with you and to see you again. And for me, it's not future movements. It's a continuation of the human rights movement. You know, how do we see people? Are they able to thrive? And so whatever that means, be it advocating for change in policing, advocating for housing, environmental justice, changing the church so that it is actually more like Jesus out in the streets. And also as we look at the grassroots and efforts and national policies, what we need are politicians who care about people as opposed to wanting a position. So it's not so much the policies, because the policies are mere words, but it's, do you have people in place who will really advocate for the people they are supposed to be representing? Because that is a major problem. Folks get in Congress and then do their own thing, and their people think that they are advocating for them, but no, they're just trying to hold on to their position. And so all of this is just a continuation of what we need to be doing in terms of ensuring that for us who are church, that God's people have what God has given, God has provided, and that it is equitably distributed.
I like that. Politicians who care about people.
Yeah.
That really makes a difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Anybody else, any other feedback with that?
You know, I said, first of all, thanks for having me. And at this time, I noticed that the death total in the U.S. has reached 500,000 people who have now lost their lives because of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And this morning I was reading an article about that they intended or they believe that it's going to get to 600,000, which is the same amount during the yellow fever pandemic. And we have advanced in so many things, and yet we are in the same place that when the first pandemic. And it is so disheartening that we can put a man on the moon and we can create these devices, and yet still injustice. Some people getting vaccines, some people are not, some people, it's just so many things to think about and to process. And I think where the country is also, and this is just my opinion, a reflection sometime of the church. Because we want politicians to care for the people, but Lord God knows we need pastors to care for the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to be able to get, yes, policies are important, but I think this is taking us back to basic, and that is human rights and a heart to help the least of these. And for Black History Month, I've just been revisiting Dr. King's speech and listening to those speeches and watching those movements and seeing God maybe send a revival, ignite something in us that will make us even just go back to basic of human rights and our love and a concern for the least of these, including our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. And I'll tell you one thing that I do admire about the three of you is that I know that you are aware of policies, things that are going on in the world, and you are not afraid to talk about voting, let's say, to talk about the pandemic, let's say, to talk about things that are going on in the White House. So many, and Dr. Jazz, you just mentioned it, pastors are, they tread lightly, and it may be because of, they may be afraid of tithes and offerings or whatever it might be, but they're afraid to be honest or talk about those things. And that does go into human rights because we're not being treated fairly. Human rights is not just a movement. Maybe we need to understand what human rights is all about. It's not just a movement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a good question that I want to pose to all of you. What, if you had to explain to your congregation what human rights is or looks like, what would you say?
Mm-hmm.
I think it really has to do with people having equal access to basic health care, financial services, education. As we know, there are so many disparities in our community just with education. It pains me even now to think about a lot of the parents who are dealing with the virtual learning. I know, we probably all of us know of parents who are struggling with that and how that looks. And some parents have funds or budget to do more than, or do a tutorer. Why isn't that available for those who are in public schools? There should be some type of layer, and I guess the other thing that I've been thinking about, even as far as that's concerned, and we can move on, is wow, what happens after the pandemic? How does education look? For me, that's been somewhat one of the things I've just been pondering for the last several weeks. What is that going to look like? How will that continue to impact our churches, our communities? What will be the long-term ramification of the pandemic on our education system? That's going to affect, I think, the policies, things that are going to be changing even after all this is settled down. What's going to happen? What is it going to look like? What do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? What do we need to keep? Those are questions that I think we all need to start asking now. Our public officials, educators, churches, all of us really need to ask that hard question.
Right.
I mean, what is it to be human? Okay, what does it take to be human? Not just to exist,
right?
But to be human. And how do we tear down those obstacles that keep people? We're not asking for a handout. We're not asking for more. We're just saying knock down the barriers, knock down the obstacles that keep people from being human.
Right.
That they have an equitable share again of what God has already provided. Why do you have some people who have a lot and some folks who have none?
Right.
How do we, and we have to get over this, what's called the zero-sum game. Trying to think of her first name, but McGee, she wrote a book about the zero-sum game. How we in this world society feel that if you get something, that means that something is taken away from me.
Yeah.
As opposed to there's enough for both of us, all of us, to have what we need to be human and to thrive. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be driving a Maserati, but it does mean that I'll be able to get to work. I can get to work. And so we need to really think about what the role of the church is in that, and whether or not you have pastors who are willing to get out of the mold and preach and teach what needs to be preached and taught? Or are we too busy trying to maintain the institution, maintain that building that some of us had not been in for a year? So it's obvious we don't need that building. And how do we use our resources, the resources of the church, to help the people?
Right.
And so these are the tough questions. We know people want to get back into the building and, because my mama did this and my grandmother left. But we have shown what we've been teaching, that that building is not the church.
Right.
We are the church. And so wherever we are, that's where church is. And so if we just kind of deep feed it back into the church after the pandemic and go back to what we were doing before, 500,000 people died in vain.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And even now, one of the things that I've been trying to do, even with our financial team, is just to say, how do we position ourselves or reposition ourselves to be, again, more community oriented? I know it's going to squeeze our budget, but we're the church, and the church needs to be more present in the public. It's somewhat sad that some churches have this bad. Well, I'll just say some churches have a bad. What is the word I'm looking for? It's the myth that it's just all about the building, just like Pastor just said. It's just about, but we're finding out that it's not about the building.
It's not.
It's about what we can offer to the community, how we can position ourselves as a church to help the community, to inform the community, to give help, to give access, like I said, to just some basic things. We might not be able to do it, but at least, okay, maybe we can connect with someone else to direct people to what they need, if we don't have it. And that's one thing, I know that I'm trying to mold and remold, and so we can continue to make our presence known as a ministry, and I really believe that ministry is not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same moving forward if we really take this time seriously, and we embrace, the struggle, the things that we have been impacted on these last couple of years. If we really take it seriously, we will make a difference, and continue to make a dent in the grassroots and how we even do ministry.
I mean, why can't we be a clearinghouse? Why can't we work together across denominational or non-denominational divides and just come together? And so you have something, I have something, instead of me duplicating what you all have.
Right. Let's
you go, right. If I got somebody over here, you go on over there, as opposed to, no, you got to stay here. So we need to think differently about how we are our church, that we are community organizations that just happen to be Episcopal, or just happen to be Baptist, or just happen to be non-denominational. But we are about community, and how can we be a blessing to the communities in which we find ourselves?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Dr. Jazz, did you want to speak on the human rights?
Yeah, I think when I define human rights, and my understanding is every human being have some basic rights, the fundamental of what qualify you for human. Even my dog has some rights. I've got a little dog, and some dogs have more rights than human rights. And you know what I'm saying? My dog can fly on a plane, and my dog can be in first class, and my dog can have, and then there's humans who don't even have those accessibility and those not even privilege, it's just rights. And so for me, it doesn't matter what color of your skin is, it's just basic fundamental human rights that should be all across the board, and everybody should have opportunities and should have the same access to information, access to data. Of course, this whole vaccine debate is going on, and there was thing about, how rich people are jumping the line and paying extra for it and stuff and things. So again, just making sure that everybody has the same opportunity to succeed, or at least at least get some shoelace for their boots that they're trying. At least let everybody have boots. If you want them to pull themselves up by their own bootstrap, let's give everybody boots, at least some boots. So those to me is the basic foundation.
Yes.
I want to say also, if I can, that to me, we lost a building, but we gained a movement.
Wow.
And you can either be a monument or you can be a movement. And many churches was just monuments. Now it's a movement. For me, we back to the book of Acts where there's no building, but my goodness, we're making a greater impact now more than ever. Now, I don't have a building, didn't have a building. Thank you, God. For 5 years, I cried, well, Lord, please give me a building. Then COVID came and I said, God, thank you. I don't have a building. So I don't have a mortgage, but I have a mission. And there's a difference between a mortgage and a mission, just like there's a difference between a monument and a movement. And this pandemic, as tragic as it is, it has moved us. It has moved the church. It has moved the agenda. It has moved the gospel. As painful as this has been one of the best thing that has happened, because we are salt, has been in the salt shaker, but salt is no good until it comes out of the salt shaker. And so I'm excited, as painful as this year and last year has been, I'm excited about where the church is going. I'm excited about where politics, I mean, even with negative stuff, I'm still excited because I think, and you can correct me, I've never seen such a movement of young people. I mean, young people, double mask, triple mask, and was in the street from the moment of the George Floyd killing, the Breonna Taylor, you name it. And it's like, wow, I read about it, with Dr. King and his crew and sitting at the counters and being dragged. Now I'm seeing it for myself, this new set of young people, and Lord have mercy, and I may be getting ahead of it, but they have mastered social media. And I was telling somebody the other day that they're doing what Dr. King wouldn't have been able to do. They have galvanized in such a way in the social media space that the civil rights and human rights is now in this digital space, from Clubhouse to Snapchat to TikTok to Facebook to YouTube. I can't even keep up with it. But they have spread all through that digital world, and now they have global support, global backing, because now it's not just one platform, and I'm excited about that.
You're right. The genie is out of the box, and it's not going back in. And they have realized, because I am between, I remember King and I remember the sit-ins, and that's now see the young people, and almost as to say that my generation kind of fell asleep at the wheel in a way, because we thought we had arrived in the promised land because we could shop at the white stores and we could live in the white neighborhoods and we can send our kids to the white school. And right underneath the surface, all that stuff was just bubbling, bubbling, bubbling. And so it exploded as we started seeing and recognizing the killings of Black men and women by the police. But that's always been there. We just haven't acknowledged it. But the young people said, no, we are going to acknowledge it. And then they looked at us and said, we thought you had fixed this.
Wow.
Right? We thought you had fixed this. You all had overcome. Right? But then we realized, no, we fell asleep because we got comfortable. We got comfortable. But as you talk about this global expansion of this movement, that genie is not going in that box. And as King said, we're either going to have chaos or we're going to have community.
Yep.
Those are the choices. And I'd rather have community than chaos.
Right.
But they are willing to go. They go, which way you want to go?
Ooh.
We can go either way. You let us know which way you want to go. And so that's important to be there to support them. And of course, to have our churches as centers for community engagement.
Right.
Yeah, they're on TikTok and they're on Facebook, but sometimes they do need a room. They do need a place to come in, and that our churches, our buildings that may or may not be there after the pandemic are that we're willing to open the doors and say, just come on in. We're here for you. Whatever you need, just come and rest, and then get ready to go back out and continue the fight again.
Yeah.
Well, that's where that maturity comes in. That was that struggle between the millennials and the wisdom. We have to give them a place of rest. We have to let them, run, burn that energy, and then we give them that place of rest. That's why, you never throw away all that energy and the new age. You never throw that away. No. Because they need you and we need them. We needed them to put us into all that new stuff, that new internet and the TikTok and all that other stuff we don't quite understand or can't get to so quickly. Yeah, so quickly. I can get to it, but not as fast as they can get to it. But we have to provide a place of rest and, slow down a minute. Let me help you say that a little bit better so we can get you in that room.
We can be the sages.
Yeah,
We can be the sages.
You
Yeah.
know, we can bridge between king and them because we knew both. And also, again, how we just got too comfortable.
Comfortable, yeah.
We got comfortable.
Yeah.
I think, Pastor, that's one of the critical things that you mentioned about being a bridge. And I think what has been lost from our generation to just let's just say the millennials is that we haven't really been a bridge to them because we don't quite understand their language. And that for some in our generation has been a struggle. I purposely try to engage them while sometimes it's a little difficult because of their lingo or their the way that they communicate, but I purposely try to insert myself into their lives to number one, learn the lingo, learn the language, figure out how they communicate, because let's be real, they communicate differently.
They do.
Our age group, the 45 and up, they communicate differently from us. So we must not be afraid to engage the generations that are following us. I think for some of our predecessors, I think they were somewhat afraid to see the change, and they wanted to try to the keep the status quo, if you will. We got there. Okay, we're better now, but as you just indicated, maybe we were asleep and we didn't bridge the gap like we're supposed to. So I think moving forward, how do we continue to bridge the gap and make sure grassroots movements are still moving forward? We have to continue to be the persons that bridge the gap between the generation that's following us. And most of our churches, we're multicultural, so we have to be multilingual, if you will, in touching and making sure that we're communicating the message that we got to keep pushing, we got to keep struggling, we have to remember what was, but we also have to be able to adapt to what's happening, what's working now.
And we have to ask them what they need from us. Okay, because sometimes we come in and we want to talk.
We assume. We assume that we know what they want,
right,
what they need.
Right. But we have to ask them. We have to come in and be a silent presence and ask, like, what do you need from us? How can we help you do what you are called to do? And accept it.
I'd like to say that one of the things that I've heard you all say was community and building, and the fact that we've been taken out of our building, and that you had to go out to the community and do things differently. I heard Dr. Jazz say that she's thankful that she doesn't have that building, and she didn't have that building. And Pastor Myron, you said that you had to do things differently to go out to the community, even though it might stretch the budget a little bit, but you have to be community oriented, more community oriented. And I believe that a lot of the churches have to do things differently. Now the work is beginning where the church was our comfort zone. We came to church and, you did like someone said, this was my pew and this is mother did this and father did this. And, I was the usher or whatever. But now we have to do some real work where we're touching people differently. There's food, there's other services that we have to provide. We have to be more creative. We have to do more human things to teach people, to reach people, to help people. We started out, and I think the previous president kind of helped with that kind of stuff. We may not want to give him a lot of credit for some things, but sometimes out of ignorance, we learn. And I think more people became aware of policy and politics because of the negative and because they realized how they were treated. And so now is the time, while the pot is hot, to jump in and be more community oriented. We don't have the building anymore. So now we've really got to get out there and work and touch our people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much time we have, but I still want to hear just a few more, just a final thought from all of you. Just a final closing thought from all of you before we part this evening, this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Jesus transformed lives. And whenever he was in a building, he was cutting up. And so, right. So we need to be in the life transformation, but not doing charity and keeping people where they are, but really transforming lives. We have to be more like Jesus. And when we recognize, and this was Dr. Jazz was talking about, the Acts church, the early church. The church started schools, education. The church started hospitals. The church started all of this stuff that we assume the government should be doing. We need to take it back. It started with us. We need to take it back and really get serious about transforming people's lives so that they can be who God is calling them to be, regardless of whether or not they know God, there is a God, whatever. They're still God's people. And so that is what we are called to do, to transform lives.
Wow. One of the things I was pondering about our time today was the fact that I think all of us as, of course, pastors and the African American community of people of color, we have to continue to be, I think, students of history. Remember how the previous generation dealt with things, but not just concentrate on how they dealt with it, but learn from it. Glean from what they did right, what they did wrong, and try to not just duplicate what happened, but embody it, but make it better so that we can continue to progress as a people. Because I think that one of the things is that we sometimes we forget is we have to remember who we are as a people. And I think over these last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, I think there has been a great awakening, if you will, of wow, we do matter. We have a voice, we have a vote, so we must continue to make progress there, and we all, and I'll just be the last thing that I'll say. We have to remember that, yes, while we are an African American people, we have to remember that who we are, our color, it doesn't define who we are, but it is who we are. And we embrace it, and embody who we are, because we are a gifted people. We are a great people. And we can't allow the other people, other races to continue to oppress us mentally, because a lot of it is mental.
It's mental.
A lot of it is, of course, institutional. But let's continue to find ways to break through and push through and progress our people, so that we can be better, so that it will be equality across the board.
Yeah, I'm so honored and delighted to be on this platform. And again, thank you so very much. This morning, I'm on Facebook and IG every Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. And I was talking about this passage in Joshua where they crossed the Jordan, the children of Israel crossed the Jordan, and the Lord tells them, when I part the Red Sea, make sure you get a rock or get some stones, because in years and days from now, your children are going to ask you, what does these stones mean? You're going to tell them you crossed the Jordan on dry land when I made the path for you to cross it. And I think one of the things that we have to be instrumental is bridging the past with the present and the future. Now we have twins, they're 6-year-old Cam and Chloe, and it's crazy because they think everything is new. And I'm like, we've been there before. We've done that before. All right, so there's nothing new under the sun. And to learn their history and to then the history motivates them into where we go. But when I was coming on here, Mayor, question that you put in the description of this topic is, where do we go from here? And I have been pondering that, where do we go from here? And I'll close with this. You know, Noah, before the flood, before COVID-19, Noah built an ark. Y'all know, everybody knows the story. But after he planted a vineyard, before he built, but after he planted a vineyard. And I think now in this season where we go, we have to be more innovative. We have to be community oriented. We don't have to settle for our vice, because we have a vice president in one of the most powerful place. Just because we've got a new president, we still have a whole lot more to do and a further place to go or to take our people. And so I would say to everybody is to put on your innovative, your creative hat, and don't wait for the government to do it for you. But you now as a community, as a people, which start with just even your family, to be dealing with generational wealth and have those kind of discussion that we're having about generational wealth and legacy, and leaving something beside a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton for some family, and yet have to do a GoFundMe funeral. But now let's build generational wealth. Let's build a legacy. Let's connect as a community. And when we rise, everybody rise. And so that's my whole thing for my church, is to say, hey, listen, service is our thing. We have an organization called SHINE. SHINE stands for Sharing Hope in Negative Experience. That's our CDC. And we say, when we see something negative, it's our job to shine some light on it, to bring attention to it, to do something about it, to make a difference in that place. So we go and find the most negative, darkest, gloomy places or situation, and we're like, hey, let's get a flashlight and let's shine truth on it. Let's shine light on it. And I think if we share our light, men will see our good works and they'll glorify our Father. We wouldn't even have to tell them about our Father. Let's just do the good works and shine in the places that need to shine.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. That's a good one. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so very, very much for being a part of this panel and this discussion. This discussion was fantastic. I thank you so much for your input, your knowledge, your ability. I thank you so much for just helping us to move forward in this, where we are. I thank you for your optimism and your relentless faith that we that we are going to move forward. We're going to get through this, and we're going to move forward. So thank you for a dynamic discussion. You have given us all a lot to think about. I want to thank our guests and our participants, and also our audience for tuning in to the program tonight. Thanks so much for sharing your evening with the town of Edmonston. Again, have a safe, enjoyable evening, and good night.
Black history is American history. Thank you for watching our show.